gacchami. Dhammam sharanam gacchami. Sangham sharanam gacchami. Buddham sharanam gacchami. Dhammam sharanam gacchami. Sangham sharanam gacchami. Buddham sharanam gacchami. Dhammam sharanam gacchami. Sangham sharanam Dumba jumden de deje jeva dajumba yandawa zobe sanje rigwa dan shamsu demba devara jeva jigden jemba jevo debe kalo yurwa lana meba lada menamje Dumba sanje jumden de bejawa shaja tuba la chaze lo chudo japsu che wo Dumba jumden de dejen sheba chajumba yangdangwa zobe sanje rigwa dan shabsu demba Devara jeba jigden jemba jebo dube kalu yurwa lana meba lada minamje Dumba sanje jumden de bejawa shaja tuba la chaze lo chudo japsu che o Dumba jumden de dejen sheba Jajumba yandaba zobe zanje rigba dan shabsu demba devara sheba jigden kemba kebu dube Kalu jurwa lana meba lada menanje Dumba sanje jumden de pejawa shaja tuba la chazelo Chudu jauzu che sanje chudan soji chonama la chanju badu tani japsu che dagi chushi jebe chonama je drola penche sanje drobara sho sanje chudan soji chonama la janju badu tani japsu che dagi chushi jebe chonama je Dola penche sanje drobara sho sanje chudan sonje chonamala chanju bado tani japso che dagi chushen jebe chonamanje Dola penche sanje drobara sho Good morning. I don't know how many are tuning in today. I left a message, or kind of an announcement, after last Sunday's live streaming to say that we are going to have this additional class, but looks like many didn't see, or many didn't get to listen to that announcement. Anyway, let's begin. So I have been revisiting positive psychology, and they reminded me of one strategy to boost our well-being. So of course, gratitude is the one way. And in order to increase this sense of appreciation, they, in positive psychology, when they educate, when they give positive education, they always start the class by asking, what went well today? So I am going to start with the same question for you to think and reflect for maybe 1 minute. 1 minute. What went well this morning or yesterday? If the morning is too short, then you can reflect what went well yesterday. So let's do that. Come up with 3 things that went well for you. There are many things going well for us, but we fail to look at it. We fail to focus on it. Our tendency is to focus on the negative, what went wrong, instead of what went well. But if we are able to focus on what went well, the things that went well, I think it can boost our positive emotions, thereby contributing to our well-being. Why some people are so unhappy is that they only focus on the negative aspects. And from the Buddhist point of view, negative things are part and parcel of our existence. We will, let's rephrase, everyone will go through the life's ups and downs. There is no exception. Monks, Rinpoches, lay people, male, female, there is no discrimination. Unless and until we are out of this existence, we will undergo all kinds of experiences. sometimes pleasant experiences, and sometimes unpleasant experiences. That's who we are. That's what samsaric beings are. That's our kind of character or part. So since that is our existence, that is what we are bound to experience, so then we should find a way to mitigate the negative impact of such. Because at the moment we are still in samsara, so we are not yet freed from this cyclic existence. So we are bound to experience all this. But however, if we are able to come up with a method to minimize the impact, the negative impact of the adverse situations, then it may not uproot or eliminate the problem from the root, but at least it can help us mitigate from amplifying. Remember, we talked about two persons, one who always have a way to interpret the situations in a positive way, in an optimistic way, and then on the other hand, a person who always interprets everything in a negative aspects. And the difference when it comes to the impact or the result, it will be a marked difference. There will be a stark difference. One who sees everything in negative way has greater chances of developing depression, because instead of interpreting that as a conditional thing, situational thing, the pessimist person tend to blame it on one's failure. I am loser. I always fail. There is this catastrophic interpretation. You fail in one subject, or you fail in one subject, but you kind of make that a judgment of yourself, and then believe yourself to be a failure. You close your eyes on the things that one has done well. On the other hand, the optimistic person, so that person will be always resilient, no matter what challenges throws on his or her way. That person will always find a way to bounce back. So here, this is one way of coping with such situations when we are faced with adverse situations. One way is we can try to find meaning in there. Remember, we have talked about I have quoted this before. For Kadamba masters, when things go wrong, they view it as their spiritual master or spiritual mentor. Because when we suffer, what it really says is that we have done something in the past which was not desirable, and now we are reaping the fruits of that particular action. So what does this incident teaches us is that, first of all, we should stop engaging in that kind of action. And since that is already committed, we should engage in purifying that. So when we get that lesson, so that unpleasant experience becomes like our spiritual master who shows what to abandon and what to cultivate. So likewise it says, when we undergo suffering, it is like a broom that sweeps the dust. So karma once committed has to experience the result unless we verify them completely. So one way to exhaust our negative karma is by experiencing the results. So when we experience suffering or pain or misery or unhappiness, so we are in the process of exhausting that particular negative karma. So that's how we should look at adverse situations. That will not solve the issue or the problem we are facing or the suffering we are undergoing, but at least we may feel the pain and suffering physically, but mentally we are relaxed. There is no much anguish and pain and sadness or whatnot. So that's what we have been talking in the past about taking all these adverse situations, various adverse situations, into part. But of course, these are temporary measures. In order for us to really eradicate all this unpleasant experience, we need to tackle, we need to counter, we need to sever the root cause, which is the ignorance. Ignorance is underneath all our pain and suffering. Aryadeva says, Lula Luang Chishindu. I think you didn't hear this in last session. I was going on and on until I received a text message from Ken to say that you have lost me. I apologize for the inconvenience. I know that you have made specific plans. In the West, everything must be scheduled and planned in advance. So you may have already planned something else today, and you have kind of reserved the earlier Sunday, the previous Sunday, for the class, but that was disrupted. I don't know what happened that day. My Wi-Fi seems to my Wi-Fi actually kept breaking. Anyway, I'm going to repeat what I said that day. So Aryadeva says, Lula luwan chishindu timu kunla nejurte. Tishin yomu tamjeja timu chombe chombar churus. So we cannot separate our parts of body from what is called the faculty of body. We cannot say this is the body part and this is not the body sense faculty. So body, the faculty of body permeates or pervades all over the parts of our body. So likewise, it says, Timukula nejote. Ignorance underlies, underneath every afflictions, there is the work of ignorance. So if we want to eradicate or eliminate all the afflictive emotions or afflictions, then it says that we need to eliminate the ignorance. There is no other way. There is no alternative. So ignorance here is not knowing or being ignorant of the reality of things, how things really exist. We have our own perception when we look at things. We have this perception, but is that the true reality? Is that the reality of how things exist? It is not. We are mistaken. So, in order to sever that ignorance, we need to develop the antidote, which is the counter, force of ignorance, which is wisdom realizing emptiness. So that's why we talked about the emptiness here. So here it says, Tenjin Dewar Chungwagang Tongna Timu Tongme Jurus. So the best or the most effective way to eliminate or to counter the ignorance is to understand the nature of dependent origination, how things are dependent originated. If we have real insight into the dependent origination, then we won't be able to, the ignorance won't be able to overwhelm us. We will be able to kind of loosen the grip on this misapprehension. That's why I said, Tejir Baba Kunjindir Tamdi Tomra Nyabarcha. So Ayadeva is saying that for that reason, I'm going to focus my writing or my talk on the dependent origination. So we have already discussed on this, how the two things are opposite. When we say things are inherently existence, we are saying that things are independent, things do not depend on other factors. But then when we see that things do depend on other factors, that kind of destroys that notion that things exist independently. So that's you have to see this relationship. So we have talked about how to do the meditation on the emptiness. And now when you come out of the meditation, things started to appear, conventional things started to appear. We will start encountering conventional things, especially attachment. When we see nice things, attachment arises. When we see things that we don't like, aversion arises. So these two are how to handle this. So we already talked about the attachment. So today we are focusing on the aversion part. Tungyen nazo milam pushi tar chunang tembar sungwe adangche tijir midun kendan tebeze chubar tawa gese laglen. All forms of sufferings are like a child stat in a dream. Holding illusory appearances to be true makes you vary. Therefore, when you meet with disagreeable circumstances, see them as illusory. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So, we encounter so many objects that cause us aversion, that disappoint us, that irritate us. So this is about when we encounter these objects, what are we supposed to do? So of course, when you have done a very powerful meditation on emptiness in that equipoise session, in that meditative session, then you still carry the effect. So whatever conventional thing appears to you, you will be able to see them as illusion. But those who haven't done a very strong meditation, very powerful meditation, so when forms of sufferings, when objects of things that give rise to aversion, so we are supposed to see them as illusions. The metaphor given here is a mother dreaming of her son dying. So it's just a dream. So we are able to see everything like a dream. For instance, let's say pleasant, unpleasant. So when we encounter pleasant situations, we develop attachment. We are happy. When we encounter unpleasant things, unpleasant experience, we develop aversion, we get irritated, we become unhappy. But then that object we call pleasant or unpleasant is also very subjective. That pleasant or unpleasant thing does not exist from its own. For example, some people like to do mountain climbing, rock climbing, bungee jumping. And those people, they find so much joy. To them, that's a pleasant experience. That's a happy and pleasant activity. But there are other people, that kind of activity is such an anxiety-giving activity. It does not bring joy and happiness in that group of people. So if the pleasant experience, the pleasant or unpleasant, exists from its own, then no matter who encounter that experience, everybody should have the same notion or same experience, same perception. But it's not. And then, like, another thing is the people that whom we don't like. We don't like because we have our own reason. To them, that person is unethical. That person is bad. Again, good or bad does not exist from its own. It is again mental projection. There is no intrinsic nature in itself. The bad person the person whom to us appear as bad person is the loving person to another person. So if good or bad exists from its own, if that person's the badness or the quality exists from its own, then everybody should have the same experience, same perception, but not. So that's how we are supposed to look at things, look at situations. Shugun milam jumanda tembe ngobu chiyame meshin nawe ngobo la ngobra shemba mache angs. So therefore, when you meet with disagreeable circumstances, see them as illusory. So that's what Bodhisattvas do. And since we are pursuing the path of Bodhisattva, we should also see in that way. So that's more powerful than applying the earlier kind of various attitudes. So this will, when we are able to see things as illusion, as like illusion, dreamlike, then we will be able to reduce the attachment or the strong aversion or anger or hatred, because we perceived something solid there. So when we tell ourselves that, oh, it is actually my projection, there is nothing real there, then it kind of loosens. And then our anger or hatred will also become weaker. So that's about post-meditational awareness of the illusory nature of phenomena in regard or in relation to aversion, the objects of aversion. Seeing the object of aversion as empty nature or empty or devoid of inherent existence. Sometimes when you say empty, empty, people may think that it's just empty equals nothingness. That's not what we are talking. So now we come to the 6 perfections. So earlier parts is all about taking adverse situations into the path. So that is to really help us when we pursue the path, when we are on the when we are practicing, so that we can go forward. If we are unable to take these various unpleasant situations, adverse situations into the path, then we get stuck there. Those adverse situations can become a huge hindrance, and we may even lose our will to pursue. And that's the danger where we may let go of our bodhicitta. So that part is to really to help us in our practice, in our practice of keeping the bodhisattva vows. And now comes the other part. So in order to achieve enlightenment, we need to cultivate lots of merits. We aspire to achieve a state of enlightenment that is made up of 2 kayas, the Dhammakaya and what is that one? Rupakaya. Yeah. So these 2 kayas require specific causes. So for the Dhammakaya, the main cause of Dhammakaya is the wisdom, realizing emptiness. And the Rupakaya, for that we need the method aspect, which are these the first 5 perfections. So that's why in 37 practices it also covers these practices. Chanju ndöbe luijan tangkö na chiru ngobo namla mö chikö tejir lenda nami mirewe chimbatongwa kese laglins. When those who want enlightenment must give even their body, there is no need to mention external things. So this first 2 stanzas emphasizing the need to engage in the practice of generosity. It says that when you reach a certain level, bodhisattvas need to even give their body. And since they need to give their body, then what need is there to say about giving external things? So in short, part of the bodhisattva practice, we need to engage in the practice of giving both material and, if requires, even our body. So question now is, how should we go about? Is there any particular way of engaging in this practice? So this one, the second, that's 2 lines. Therefore, without hope for return or any fruition, give generously. Normally, when we engage in ordinary giving, our motivation is always tainted. There is always, and most of the time, I won't say always, most of the time, there is an agenda, there is an angle, there is some expectation. But when we engage in that kind, engage in the practice of generosity with that kind of motivation, that does not qualify as the practice of Bodhisattvas. So, in order to qualify as the actual practice of generosity, one must give without hope for return. We should not expect anything. I'm giving this so that if I give this, I will get this in return. So when we give with that kind of motivation, that kind of expectation, so that's a sustained practice. Or any fruition. So normally we say that, oh, in order to have resources, we need to engage in the practice of generosity. So if our motivation concerns about fruition, so that means in the next life, even though you are not thinking in this very life, but if we do give with the hope that this practice will this practice will bring adequate resources in my next life. So even though it's not about this life, you're thinking beyond this life, but Bodhisattva's practice should not even concern that. So it's all about benefiting the other person. As long as the other person benefits, as long as I can help the other person, as long as I can alleviate the suffering or hunger or thirst, then that's it. So Bodhisattva practice concerns only about benefiting other person, not even the iota of benefiting oneself. Therefore, without hope for return or any fruition, give generously. This is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So even though we have covered this before, but I just wanted to highlight some things. So generosity, the practice of generosity, there are two aspects. A consciousness that is willing to give, and the physical and verbal actions that are motivated by this attitude. So mainly it is the thought, this consciousness that is willing to give, is the generous mind, generosity. And then motivated by that, we can engage in actual actions by physically helping another person, physically distributing foods or drinks, or helping another person in a job to help build something. And then being kind, being generous with our words. We can also be generous with our understanding. Sometimes when we talk about generosity, we think that generosity applies only to other person, not in the inner circle, not in our family. We can be generous with our our friends, our family members, our parents, our children, our spouses. So one thing we can be generous of is understanding. Being generous in understanding. When the other person does something wrong or said something nasty, but try to be more understanding. Try to find a way to interpret the situation. Or maybe that person, let's say somebody comes, your family member comes back from a long day at work, and then agitated and said something nasty. So instead of getting upset and responding, one can be understanding, generous in understanding. Oh, must have a hard day, must have a difficult day, must have a long day. So Tibetan, we have a saying, you are actually mad at the yak, but you kick the horse. So sometimes you are mad at your boss, but there's nothing you can do. You cannot even retort. But what people do, come back and then blast at the people who are dear and near to them. So that's one way to be generous. Generous doesn't mean that you have to give money or something. Generous in thinking, generous in understanding. That's called kindness. So there are, in a way, it's like the mental part and the physical and the verbal part. So sincere desire to give whatever is necessary to those in need. So it has to be a sincere. So sincere cuts off those stained motivations, expecting something for return and also for fame. So this fame is quite dangerous. People give donations hoping that if I give this, people will praise me. People will say that, oh, he or she is so generous. So that one becomes a worldly concern. That's why I tell people to be very careful when you kind of sponsor a big offering in monastery. Tibetan practice, we have this practice to make offerings to Sangha community. But if you make this offering viewing Sangha as refuge and believing that, through the merit one can achieve enlightenment in order to benefit sentient beings, that's different. But there is this danger of making big offerings, especially there is a competition when it comes to money offering. Or that family offered 500 rupees to each monk. It's a big deal. Even in monastery those days, tomorrow is a big money offering involved, so everybody will set alarm. And then the sponsors, if they chase after the fame, then whatever amount they spend, it's in a way kind of wasted. It did not become a Dharma practice. It did not result in creating a causes to become enlightenment. So that's why we have to be very careful. Always always check our motivation. Am I giving this to receive fame, or am I giving this to get something in return? Is there any ulterior motives, any angles? Make sure that you give when there is no such, when you are sincere. So when we talk about the practice of generosity, it has to be a sincere desire to give, to help the other person. The perfection of generosity is complete when one's attitude is perfect. So I think in Shantideva we have discussed this. When we talk about perfecting the practice of generosity, it doesn't necessarily have to eliminate the poverty in the world. As long as one's one's attitude is complete, one's what do you call it? One's this willingness to give is fully developed. One is willing to give anything. There is not even a tiny hesitation. That's when one has perfected the perfection. Of course, that will only happen when we become Buddha. So the main hindrance of us perfecting this generosity is this miserliness, this stinginess, this attachment to our things. So in order to be able to improve our generosity, we need to first tackle our stinginess, the miserliness. Where does this miserliness comes from? It arises because of the attachment. So we need to think of the essenceless. Things, you may possess so many things, but then when the time comes, they cannot help us. We have to leave everything. Even you have tons of gold, you have to leave it behind. And somebody else is going to enjoy that. So it is good to contemplate on the flaws of greed, flaws of attachment, flaws of holding on to things. Then one may be able to loosen that grip. Most important aspect of Buddhist practice of generosity is training the mind, not the physical act of giving. So it is about training our mind of giving. But of course, it doesn't mean that we should not. We should try our best whenever opportunity arises. The division, the kinds of practice of generosity, the gift of Dharma, that is to giving teachings in order to lead others to clear away ignorance and gain the wisdom that leads to emancipation. So basically it is about giving Dharma teachings. When people ask questions on Dharma, so when you even teach, when you even explain one stanza, that is the gift of Dharma. But sometimes, what happens is sometimes we mean well. People are so caught up, no, I won't say caught up, people so enthusiastic. So when they come to Dharma classes, so they themselves have benefited. And then they become so inspired and they try to kind of, bombard other people. So that one, yeah, you have to think. Only when there are interests, then it is good too. Otherwise, it can have a backlash. People may never go to any of these teachings because he or she had enough. There we have to be careful. Yes, motivation is good, but we also need to use our common sense. Wisdom has to combine with our kindness. Then the gift of fearlessness, any action to elevate others' fear, is saving others from fear, from danger, like rescuing animals. Tibetans have this practice of what we call animal liberation. So they go to wet market where they sell animals which are going to be slaughtered. Like we go to this Chinese wet market, they have all kinds of animals there. Even chicken, you can choose. Pigeons, turtle, even frogs. So that's kind of practice where you can go there and then buy those animals and then liberate. So many APMT centers, they do that. Some do on monthly basis. And I have been in many of these Sunday and the morning markets to buy animals. Material gifts, of course, generosity of giving material things. Then the generosity of giving material things. So that's the material gifts. So the practice of generosity is about mental, mainly mental, primarily mental, developing this magnanimous, that generosity, that heart to give to others, to help others. So now the three main motivations that is highlighted in the Lamrim Chemo. So first, whatever it may be, when we give, these three motivations must be present. Is important part of the practice. So first, the focus on the purpose. Why are you giving? Your practice, your engaging in practice of generosity is not about all that those wrong motivations that we discussed before. It is not about expecting something in return, not about gaining fame, not even about achieving or good results in the next life. So here the focus is on the purpose, which is to practice generosity to accomplish the accumulation of merit to become Buddha. This is the Bodhisattva's practice. Bodhisattva has already pledged to liberate sentient beings, to provide the happiness to all sentient beings. So that one can do only when one becomes Buddha. So in order to become Buddha, one needs to engage in the causes. So in this case, the accumulation of merit. So one's intention has to be to achieve enlightenment. For that, I need to accumulate merit. So I'm engaging in this practice. That's one. Another is focus on the object giving. So when you give to another person, what should we view the object as? Do we view as it's mine, so now I'm giving to you? It says no. Giving as if returning their own possessions. Because Bodhisattvas, they have already given away everything to sentient beings. Mentally, they have, let go of all their possessions. So now when a person comes to ask for it, so it's like you are returning somebody's thing that they have entrusted to you. Giving as if returning their own possessions. So this is to avoid the way you give. Sometimes people give by counting, that like kind of boasting. That, I'm giving this, this one, I've done this, that's good for you. I've also like counting the the great help that one is now giving. And then also like disrespect, treating the other, in a condescending way, belittling the recipient. So in order to avoid that, so if we have this kind of attitude, if we adopt that attitude that I'm just simply returning the things, then our attitude and also the manner in which we give will be different, will be like equal. It's like I am the giver, you are the receiver. Then the third one is focus on the recipient. So how should we view the recipient? Should we view them as a pitiful thing, something to be belittled about, something to look down? No, it says viewing the recipient as spiritual friend for providing the opportunity to practice generosity. If there are no recipients, how are we going to practice generosity? There's no way. So when others ask for help, we should be overjoyed. But it's not the way, isn't it? We try to avoid. If we see a beggar on the street, we take a detour, even though it will take longer, but we are willing to put up with that hardship rather than face the beggar. So I think these are really great advices. If we are able to view the beggar or the recipient as our spiritual friends, we will be more than happy to give. Every opportunity we will be happy. We will even look for these opportunities. So these three things we need to remember when we give. Anything, it doesn't matter how much we give, but this is about with what kind of attitude we should adopt when we give. Then the last one is called Tamba Tukden in Tibetan. So they translate into 6 supremacies. So this one you can apply it to almost every practice. Supreme basis. Practice generosity motivated by the spirit of enlightenment. So this is all also about intention. No self-interest, no angles, no ulterior motives, is mainly to achieve enlightenment, mainly to benefit the other person. So here the spirit of enlightenment is the bodhicitta, motivated by bodhicitta. Supreme thing, Mobutamba, holding the thought to give everything even while engaging in specific acts of generosity. Even if you are giving a packet of food, but your thought should always hold that I will give anything. So at the moment you are only giving a packet of food, but you always have this, hold this mind, that openness that I'm willing to give anything they ask. At the moment I'm giving this, but I'm open to giving anything other person needs that is within my reach. Then supreme aim, giving for the sake of their immediate happiness and ultimate benefit. So you are giving mainly to elevate the person's present and lasting, the problems, to benefit, to help whatever the person, let me rephrase, is to benefit short-term as well as long-term. So mainly your goal, your aim is to benefit the other person. So that's what it means. Chedu Chawa Tamba. Then the supreme skill in means that is imbued with wisdom realizing emptiness. So whatever we give, we call this Chimba Chinja Lembu Tongbe Tong. We have to see emptiness in the action, the object, and the recipient. So whatever you are giving, that's also empty. The act of giving is also empty, or the recipient is also empty, devoid of inherent existence. So here it is about complementing our practice of generosity by wisdom realizing emptiness. Supreme dedication, dedicating the virtue from generosity to obtain enlightenment. So of course, when we give something to the other person with that kind of pure thought, pure motivation, definitely we would have accumulated such a huge merit. But if we don't dedicate properly, then it can be destroyed by an instant of anger. Remember, we talked about that. So how do we dedicate? We should not dedicate for our welfare, our well-being, for us to be successful, for us to become wealthy. Instead, dedicate the virtue from generosity to obtain enlightenment. Whatever merit I have created, may all the merit become the causes and condition to become enlightenment, so that I can help sentient beings. That's supreme dedication. Then supreme purity, for the purpose of stopping both the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. So in order to achieve enlightenment, we need to cross over the two hurdles, two obscurations. We have to eradicate these two obscurations, the afflictive and the cognitive obscurations. We call it Nyundip and Shetip. The obscuration to nirvana and obscuration to enlightenment. So whatever merit we have created, we should also kind of dedicate or kind of engaging. The purpose of engaging is to eradicate these two obscurations. So that is what is called the sixth supremacies. So if we are able to practice any act of generosity, any practice of giving, especially at this time, there are many people who really need help. I think in America it has improved, but in other parts where COVID is still surging, and there are many people, because there are many countries that are still under lockdown, and because of that, many people are suffering. Many people have not enough to eat. So if we are able to do that, even feeding birds, that's also a practice of generosity. Even rabbits. So whatever the action is, but if we are able to do with these, if we are able to incorporate these attitudes, then it qualifies as the practice of Bodhisattva. It becomes the practice of the perfection of generosity. So that's about it for today. So all the best, and see you next Sunday. Let's dedicate our merits. Tāgī jīnyē sāvē gyāwā dē tēndān dōwā guṇlā kāngpēn dāng kēvā rā chūzhūn lōsān tāwā yī tēmbē nyingbō rīngdō sēchē shō jāmbē pāwē chēdā rā kēmbā dāng guṇdō sāmbū tēyāng tēshēn dēdā guṇgē jēsū tālō jē gyāwā dēdā tamjē rābdō ngō dēsōng shēkbē gyāwā tamjē ngōwā kānglā chōdō ngāwā dē tāgī kēwē tsāwā dē guṇjā sāmbō chūchī rābdō ngōwā rā gīs. Thank you.